Hello everyone and welcome into this week's Sencha Cafe. This is Stephen Ball. I'm going to be hosting and moderating through today. And joining me online as always is Stuart Ashworth. Hi Stuart.
Morning Stephen, hi everybody.
So we had a few questions previously around integrating other components, popular components in with kind of Sencha. So we're going to look into using open tooling today and how we can kind of expand through from kind of the original Sencha command applications that have been built and to add in some of the nice stuff that you can do on open tooling as well. So as always, just a couple of quick polls before we get into that. So slight different question from most weeks based on the topic we have today. Which tooling are you currently using? Are you currently using the Sencha command or are you using open tooling? Or if you're new into Sencha, you're yet to choose. And a big lead at the moment for Sencha command. I feel like I'm commentating on a horse race or something. So, about 80–85% of you using Sencha command, around about 10–15% on open tooling so far. Okay, and nobody yet to choose, so that's good. Okay, well, we'll close that one there, and let's have a quick look at the next poll question. Which version of Sencha are you using? So are you using Sencha 7, 6, 5 or lower, or not yet using it? Okay, just under 10% of you still on Sencha 5 or older, and around about 30% of you on Sencha 6, and pretty much everybody else on Sencha 7. Okay, great, thank you for that. And the last question that we'll ask today is which Sencha toolkits are you using? Are you on Classic, Modern, or on both? And certainly as we've been going through this series, we've seen more people who are picking up and using Modern as well as the Classic, which is great to see. So yeah, just over 50% of you using Classic, about 30% of you using Modern, and then around about 15% or so of you using both, which is great. Okay. Great, as always, please go ahead and use the GoToWebinar control panel to post in your questions as we go through. We are 100% live, so if you have any questions that are coming through, we'll try and interject those when appropriate, and if not, we'll have a full Q&A at the end anyway. But for now, let me hand over to Stuart and we can get into the meat for today.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Welcome everyone to today's Sencha Cafe session. As Stephen said, we're going to be talking about the new, well, relatively new open tooling that forms part of Sencha's build toolkit. So we'll just dive straight in and get started. It's good to get a wee insight into who's using what. I expected primarily people will be using Sencha command. Still, it's good to see some people using the open tooling, and maybe today's session will show that it's quite easy to move if you want to to start using open tooling, get access to all the features that it gives us. So hopefully that will be something you can take away at the end, and maybe you can move your applications over in the future. So just quick bit about me. I'm a front-end software consultant. Been building things for the web for a long time and with Sencha for a long time. Now been a Sencha MVP for the last few years, getting involved in helping the community and putting on these sort of sessions. It's good good fun and good to share some knowledge that I have that hopefully is useful for you guys. So today we're just going to do a quick overview of the open tooling, some slides with some info on all the details about it, how it fits into the existing tools, and what the pros and cons of using the open tooling is. And then we're going to move on to a couple of demos to create a new app with the open tooling from scratch. And then we're going to take our little email client app that we've been building, and we're going to migrate that from Sencha command over to the open tooling, and just to give an insight into how easy that process is and how we can do it quickly and get access to all the good stuff in our existing applications, not just from scratch. And then at the end, hopefully, I expect we'll have time for some Q&A, and so if you want to ask any questions during the session, just put them into the question box, and we can get to them as we go, or we can keep them to the end and we can run through them all and hopefully answer any questions that pop up. So first of all, what is open tooling? So the open tooling is a set of tools that allow us to build our ExtJS applications using modern web tooling, and it opens up access to Npm, the package repositories, which is a vast library of code packages, components and utilities and all that sort of stuff, and lets us use more modern build tools such as Webpack. If you've built any applications with other frameworks, you might have come across Webpack and the Npm library already, and you probably know that Webpack's a very powerful tool for building our applications and doing all the combining and minifying and processing of our code before it gets packaged up into a production ready code bundle, and it's really just an alternative way to build our ExtJS applications and replace the Sencha command sort of proprietary tool that most people use at the moment. So there's two command tools which come in the open tooling sort of set. The first is X-gen, and that's the main command that you'll use when you're building your application. So it provides the generation of a new ExtJS project, and it gives us options to provide basic scaffolding and integrate templates and set up the themes that you want at the start. And it's a sort of mirrors the Sencha app generates command that you're probably familiar with, and that gets us started with our project. And this command Xgen also has the Migrate tool, which we'll demonstrate later on. So that's the first one, maybe the main one. And the second is X-build, which is the main tool for building, transpiling your ExtJS applications. And it essentially replaces the Sencha command build commands. Currently it's being Sencha command is sort of in there under the hood and is used for a lot of the functions, but it's slowly being migrated over to a node-based implementation of Sencha command. So if you when you run your build steps, you can see that Sencha command is being called in the background for some tasks, and although it is used in the background, we don't need to install it explicitly. It will come bundled in with that tool. So those are the two tools that we'll see used today, and we can use both of them to get into the open tooling setup. So in terms of Npm packages, Sencha has moved all of the ExtJS framework, the core framework pieces, all the components and the premium components, things like calendar and charting and themes, and they're all available as packages in a private Npm repository. So that means that we can install each of these different pieces individually from Npm and get access to all those through the Npm mechanism and into our new projects. So for example, the Ext and then the Ext Core, Ext Classic and Ext Modern, they all have their own Npm package. And this premium components like Ext Calendar and Ext Charts also do, and the modern themes, they all have their own packages and can be installed independently through Npm and become dependencies for your application. And if you want to have a look at the full list, there's a link there where you can see all the packages and how they've all been split out. So what are the benefits of using open tooling and as opposed to sticking with Sencha command? So it gives us the ability to build our apps with potentially familiar modern tooling. So obviously most other frameworks make use of the Npm ecosystem and build tools like Webpack already. So there's a chance that if you're coming from a different background, you will be familiar with these tools and know how they work, know how they fit together, and can make jump straight into using them. This is another big benefit is the easy access and integration of Npm packages. So as we said before, Npm has a huge number of packages available to make use of. Most open source packages and components are all available on Npm, and currently with Sencha command, that's a wee bit tricky way to integrate them. You have to grab the built assets and maybe integrate pull them into your own project and manage those dependencies manually. So being able to make use of the Npm ecosystem and the tooling that provides gives us a lot of options in our applications. And following on from that, there's better dependency management with Npm because we can handle all the versioning and upgrading and stuff with Npm and have that that process pushed through the Npm ecosystem rather than having to manually track all of our versions and all of our different dependencies manually in our projects. So that's a wee bit easier too. Also, we can make use of the new JavaScript features via transpiling with Babel, and that lets us use the latest JavaScript features, language features, and use them in our application now, and have the toolchain transpile these down to our target level, and so that everything's usable to the users on their browser platform, but also we get the developer experience of using the nice new language features. And we'll have a wee demo of that if we've got time during the session. Also, Ghost Webpack and Npm and all these different things that form part of the open tooling are very widely used. There's a lot of learning resources out there which we can all make use of. And if we've come across a bug or a problem that we've come across, there's a lot of Stack Overflow posts and blog posts and things all focused around these tools that already exist. So that's really helpful when we're learning and when we're trying to troubleshoot problems. So those are the main benefits of open tooling. A lot of good things. We gain a lot of good things from using it. So it's worth having a look at. Obviously, there's a few drawbacks. If we were using Sencha command already, we might have invested time into building all our sort of build tools and things around the Sencha command way of doing it. We might have custom build steps. We might have different integrations in our CI sort of pipelines. So obviously, if we switch to open tooling, these sorts of things will need to be re-implemented and re-looked at. So there's a time cost there that will need to be factored into migrating from Sencha command to the open tooling. So that's something to think about. Obviously, it's another tool chain to learn. If you're not familiar with it already from different projects, then it's a whole new ballgame. Webpack is quite complicated. I don't think anyone would argue about that. So although you've got the extra resources that we talked about before, there's a lot of content out there about it. it's just another tool to learn, and that some people won't have time to do that all the time. So something to think about, that there's a learning curve when it comes to doing complex configuration of the build tools. And the Sencha's open tooling is not quite as mature as Sencha Command. Sencha Command has been around for a long time, and so there's a lot of maturity and stability in it. And although the open tools are using that as a base for a lot of the operations, there is likely to be little edge cases and things that maybe haven't been found yet. So something to think about, that it's only a couple of years old rather than 10 years old or whatever Sencha Command is. So that's the main sort of drawbacks that I see. Perhaps if anyone else has any other things that they've thought of, feel free to share them. We can discuss them during the session. A couple of resources I'll share just now before we dive off. There's a really good deep dive taught by Mark Gizmano, who when this first released, went into a big deep dive into how it all works. So if you want to go for a bit of a deeper look into the tools and all the different options, that's a really good talk. As we mentioned before, the packages list, so you know what you can get, and this CLI reference there in the docs is really good for seeing how it works and all the commands that are available. So with that all said, let's have a little look at how we set it up, how we use it, and what the options are for building our applications with it. So we skip out of here. So the first thing to do is, obviously it's a private npm repository that all these packages exist on, so we need to have an account with Sencha, and we need to log into that, so that when we try to resolve these npm packages, we need to npm knows where to go, and we're all authenticated and things first. So to start with, we need to log into the repository. So we use this command here, npm login, and the registry address for Sencha's repo, and the scope is at Sencha, which is what all the packages come under. So we can just run that. I've already logged in, obviously, because I've been doing this, trying this out. But so we just do our username, and one thing to note is that instead of an at in your email address, it's a double dot, and we just log in with our username and password, put our email address in, and that will log us into the repository, and that'll give us access to all the packages that form the npm repository. So it's easy as that. And then the next step is to install the ExtJS tool. So all we do there is use the npm install command. We use the -g to install it globally. So that means that the x-gen command will be available in any project that we have. And we just use the name of the package, which is @sencha/x-gen. And I'll just run this even though it's already installed. And I'll go through and find all the packages and all the dependencies and install them to the local machine. So with that installed, we should have the XGen package tool available, and we can use the --help to get a really good summary of what it's of all the commands that it has. Let's just make this a bit bigger for you. So there's various different options for configuring the new app that get generated by the tool. There's 3 or 4 new templates that can be used, as a starter point for your applications. And there's also a really good interactive mode, which will take you through step by step all the bits of information that the tool needs to build your application, or generate your application rather. So the name, the template you want to use, the location, the theme, all that stuff. So it makes it dead easy to step through and create your application correctly. So to start with, we'll just paste in a command, and rather using the interactive mode. So we're going to do xgen app, which say we want to generate an application. We're going to use the modern desktop template, and we're just going to call it open tooling test. And we can just enter, and that's going to pull all the, or it's going to build all the files we need to form part of our application, just the same way Sencha command would do. And it's going to build the package.json, which is the sort of the core file that npm uses to to define all the different pieces of our application, and we'll have a wee look at that later and see what forms part of it. So so that's completed the process. You can see the all the different options that it gave us in our package.json. You can see the template we chose and the name we chose, that sort of thing. And it's showing us the output of that's going into this folder here. So we're going to cd into that folder, and we can, I've got this code window open here where we can see what's been generated. So this will be quite a familiar setup that you get from not just a regular Sencha app. We've got our app folder here with the general application files, all familiar stuff. What we might not be familiar with is seeing a node modules folder here. So that's where all the dependencies for the application go. That's something you ignore from your Git, and would be repopulated every time you pull the application from your repository and then did an npm install. That would get repopulated. Also, the package.json. Excuse me. This is the sort of definition file for your application. We can see that it's got a set of scripts which form the basis of the tooling, and we would run these scripts to trigger the dev environment, the build process, that sort of thing. And then down at the bottom, we can see the dependencies that we have for our application. So we can see that we're using the x-modern package, which is basically the modern toolkit. It's all the code for the modern toolkit. The theme that we chose is, and here's the dependency, and we can see the versioning numbers that we're at. So we're on the latest 7.5.1. If we wanted to upgrade or downgrade that, we can just change these version numbers and then reinstall, and that would pull down the correct versions from the npm repository. And finally, we've got the X dependency, which is the sort of core framework dependency. And then under here, we have the dev dependencies, which are all the packages from either the public npm repository or the Sencha private one, which are used for building the application and the transpiling. So we've got Babel transpiling plugins here, and obviously Webpack. And so these are all dependencies which are used in the build process, but not combined and output in the actual built assets that come out when we would publish our app. And finally, in the project, we have a webpack.config file. This is where any changes you want to make to the Webpack process you could put in here. So any different build steps you want to add, you could define them here. Obviously, there's a lot of code in here already. This is all just boilerplate for the X tools. So we could change any of these defaults, properties here, or add steps to there if we wanted to. So those are the main differences that we will see when we use the open tooling to generate an application. So we've got a few different bits and pieces in there, but generally the app folder stuff stays the same. So to finish this off, we're just going to run an npm install just to make sure we've got all these dependencies loaded. So it obviously has everything already, so that's fine. And then we can launch our application just like we would do with Sencha command. So we'd want to do Sencha app watch. If we were doing this with Sencha command, that would launch a sort of dev server and have the tool watching the folder structure to rebuild any assets, SAS files, that sort of thing. So we're going to just look in our package.json and we'll see that they've got a dev command here, which says we want to run the Webpack dev server. The profile we're going to use is the desktop. It's going to be running in the browser, and we want verbose no, so we don't get too much output in the console. And as a shorthand for that, we've got npm start, which basically just runs the dev command. So in the command line, we can run npm start. We'll see that command getting kicked off here, and we've got some output telling us what's happening with the application. So we're just going to wait for that to do the initial build and get the generate all the assets that are required for the ExtJS application to all run. And we'll just wait for that to go, and it should pop open a browser window when it's ready. So you see that it's going to be available on this URL 1962. There we go. So it's popped that open, and we have our base applications. This is a template that we chose, the desktop template, and it's got some basic couple of views that we can click through, and it's waiting for our CSS changes. This is very familiar to you probably from using Sencha command, waiting for changes, and it'll trigger a rebuild of assets if it needs to, and make them available. It's one thing that's interesting to note is that if with this running, we can get sort of live reload on our page. So if we close that one down, so if we go into one of the files, and if we come down here, got the main, we've got a footer there with some details, so we can add. So we could add Sencha ExtJS. If we do a save, we'll see the page reload, and our footer changes automatically, updates in line with the changes we made. So that's a wee feature of the Sencha command that lets us have a quick turnaround for making changes and seeing them in the browser. So finally, obviously, we want to be able to build our applications into packaged assets. So to do that, we can see, we can go back to our package.json and see the build step. So it does a couple of things. It does a build, it does a clean, just removes the build folder. And again, it hits Webpack for the desktop environment profile, and we're going to pass in the environment equals production. And that's going to give us, output the production version of the app. And we've also asked it's a tree shake, which essentially means that we can remove bits of packages that we've imported that we're not using. So some packages allow that to be to figure out what we use and what we don't, and throw those away so they don't become part of the build asset, which makes the output much smaller. So that's a really useful feature. So to run that, we just do npm run and build, and that run just says run one of the scripts that are defined. In this case, that is build. Just kick that off. You can see it doing the remove of the build assets, and then it's going to start. It's going to start going through the usual, Sencha command type compilation of the assets and everything. So that'll just take a few seconds to do. And once that's done, what we'll do is I'll demonstrate how we can add one of the Sencha packages into our application using the Npm repository, and then we'll demonstrate how to do it with a third-party package as well, and how to integrate that into your code. So that build's complete, so it finishes quite fast. And if I just do a quick launch a browser sync. That will launch the production folder. So there's the output folder, build/production/open tooling test. And we've got our application here. It loads very fast because it's quite a small application. But that's gone through the build process, and now we have the assets available that we can deploy to our server if we want. So dead easy, nothing too dramatic really. So the next thing I wanted to show would be how to integrate one of the other ExtJS packages. So I thought we'd integrate the calendar component. So we do that by just using the Npm Install command. We use --save, which will add that dependency to our dependencies array or collection. So at the moment we've only got 3: the modern toolkit, the core, and the theme. So we use --save, and that will put it into that list as well. So we're going to use the @sencha/calendar is the name of that package. Oh no, it's not. Sorry, it's x-calendar. Save us some debugging. So just do that, and if you've used Npm before, you're familiar sort of process. So now we see that the calendar has been added as a dependency, and in our node modules folder there will be a new package added somewhere. I'll not bother finding it, but it'll be there somewhere. And now we can use that calendar package in our application. So first thing we need to do is we need to add it to our app.json into our requires array, similarly that we would do with Sencha command. So we add the calendar option there, and then I will just add some code so that we can make use of it in our app. So in this little demo app that gets created, we have a menu.json which has those items that we see on the left hand side. So we're just going to add a new one called calendar, and we're going to give it the next type of calendar view. So that's just there, so we've got another option in the menu, and we're going to create a new view called calendar view. I'll just put it in here. Oh, sorry, new file. So we'll put it in a calendar folder, and we'll call it calendar view.js. And all we're going to do there is define a new class called calendar view, follow the standard namespace format. We'll extend this calendar panel, which is the part of the package that we just imported, and we'll give an X type, which we referenced in our menu.json. So we've got that there. So let's kick off the development server with npm run start, and that will do the preliminary building and launch our app in the browser for us. And we should hopefully see a new menu item on the left and be able to click it and see default calendar view. Obviously we've not set up any data sources or anything like that, so it'll just be a plain calendar. So there we go, calendar on the left. We can click it, and then we've got our new calendar component here, which doesn't do anything but shows us that we can get it in there, and it works. So that's how easy it is to bring in those bundles, and it just a little bit cleaner, and we can see our dependencies more clearly in the package.json, and we can manage those versioning and things if we need to from there. So that's how we use it to import Sencha packages. As we said before, there's a whole bunch of different ones you can see in the docs of how they're all split. So you can have a look there to see what other ones are available. Obviously, the different themes, I think the pivot grid is in there, the charts, all those sort of add-on components are all available as packages and can be imported in the exact same way. So the next thing I wanted to demo would be how to use it for third-party packages from the npm repository itself. So as I said, there's thousands of different ones available, different utility things, components, that sort of thing. So what I'm going to show just now is how to, I'll just open a new browser terminal window so we can leave that running. So I thought we'd add so in the personnel grid here, we've got an editor. So I thought we'd add some validation to this editing so we can check that our email addresses are valid. Very trivial example, obviously this could be done with ExtJS's validation rules, but for the sake of demonstrating, we're going to bring in a new package to do it. Obviously probably not very good practice, but we're just trying to demo how to do it. So there's a package on npm called Validator, which gives us a bunch of different utility functions to validate different inputs. So there's an isEmail function, there's a isString, isNumber, that sort of thing. In fact, we can probably bring it up here to see what I'm talking about. So validates and sanitizes strings. So this is what we're going to grab and put into our project. So nothing too exciting, but just to show you how to do it. So first of all, we need to do our npm install again. And again, we're going to use the --save to say, put it in our dependencies collection. And we're just going to use its name, which is Validator. And you see we brought it in and the browser refreshed to show us that something's changed. So now we've got, if we go to packages.json, we can see Validator showing up in our dependencies list. So at the moment we need to figure out how to get access to that code, that package in our application. So you'll notice there's an index.js file in here, which is a new file, and that is a place where we can hook into and handle our other dependencies incoming. So currently there's lodash.find has been imported. We can see it somewhere in here. There we are, lodash.find. And what we're going to do here is require that package in, and we're going to expose it to our application through a global property on the Ext namespace. So we have to be a little bit careful that we don't override things that already exist as part of the framework. But using this syntax that they've used here is underscore, name, is quite good to keep it separate. So what we can do for our purposes, we can do x.underscore validator, and we use the require function that will go and grab the validator package and import it into our application and make it available on in this property here. So with that in place, we can jump to our personnel view, and we're going to add some validation to this editor grid. So it's got the row edit plugin enabled, which means that we can do that double click and get a wee editor box. Before we go any further, we're just going to add a required for the x.toast class, which was missing in here for our build step. And then we're going to add a handler for the validate edit event, which is going to trigger on the view itself. This is a grid. This personnel view is an x.grid component. So we're just going to paste something in here. So we've got the validate edit function. This, when you click the little tick on the editor, click this, it will do a validate, and if that listener returns true, then it'll go ahead and do the completion of the edit. Otherwise, it will say, this data is not valid yet. So we get in a location object, which gives us access to the changes that have been made. And obviously we might have other validation rules here. So we say let valid equals true, and we can check if the email has been changed, and if it has been changed, then we can call our validator package, and it's got his email helper function, and pass in our email. And so that underscore validator is the validator package that we've imported from npm and imported into our application. So with that in place, we can refresh our app, and it should have refreshed. Let's just check that. So we can edit the row. Let's take out the .com So that's now an invalid email address. And if we click the tick, if you see at the bottom here, if you look closely down at the bottom, you'll see I cannot save invalid data toast popping up. That's been triggered by the failure in our is email check using our validator package. And likewise, if we add it back in, change it to .co.uk, and now we get our confirm, which is part of the template, and we don't get a toast error, and we get our change accepted into the grid. So that's how easy it is to pick a package from npm and install it to our application. We import it in the index.js using the require function, and now that package is available to be used anywhere in our app. And we could do this with all the different packages that we might want to add features to our application. And that's how easy it is. And one thing we mentioned before was talking about Babel and transpiling things. If we just do a quick nonsense example here, we might have an array of numbers and we might want to map it, and we can use the arrow functions. So we take in our number, we might want to times all by 2. If we just add that in there, and we can demonstrate that it transpiles, I think. So let's just rebuild our app. Npm run build. That's hidden behind. We'll just wait for it to build, and we can hopefully have a wee peek into the code that's generated and see that code is transpiled into a function. What you're expecting is that arrow function there to be expanded out to a regular function call, function syntax like this. Just wait a wee sec. Conscious of the time. There we go. So if we open our browser sync again, jump into the code. Where are we looking for? Trainer files, app.js. So expand that and look for not seeing it. Hold on. We'll just go into here. Somewhere we should find this code. There we go. It's in there somewhere. It's in the generated files, that's what I thought. Anyway, if we just, sorry, it's going to take ages to open, but see if you just click into here, we can see the map function, and we can see that it's been transpiled into a function keyword rather than an arrow function. So we can see that happening, and that will happen with other newer JS features. That'll happen in our build step. So that's just something to show off as well, that can be done. So we're going to quickly move on. We've got 15 minutes left. Wanted to demonstrate how to use the Migrate tool. So we'll close off this. So this is in this folder here, we have our little ExtJS mail project. So we'll just jump back to that. And if we open Sencha App Watch, we should see that is some warnings there. That's fine. We can go to localhost and see that this is our application working. Once it's loaded, it's built a lot of CSS. We get there. You see the open tool is a little bit faster, I found, to get to there. So here's a little app. It's all built on Sencha commands. So we want to change that over to the open tooling. So quite easy steps to do that. So we've got a new terminal window in our app folder, and all we need to do is the x-gen and migrate command. And this will add in the all the bits and pieces that we talked about at the beginning. So the package.json, the index.js file, it'll create the node modules, and then set everything up for the for using the open tooling instead of Sencha command. So we just run this x-gen migrate command, and it happens almost instantly. And now we can see in our folder we've got generated files folder, which is new. We've got our index.js, which has the close that. We've got a Lodash example in there. That could be removed if you don't actually want to use it. We've got our package.json, which we've got our scripts. We've got a few extra ones that we'll talk about before, and we can see our dependencies. Because this is a universal app, we're using the classic toolkit as well as the modern. So you can see that the modern toolkit and the classic have been added as dependencies. And equally, we've got a classic theme and a modern theme, and the core library there. And the rest of the dev dependencies are all probably identical to what we saw in our last project. And just the same, we've got a webpack.config, which we can put any new build logic in there if we want. Obviously do this in source control so you can revert things, but if you need to, there's a backup made of all these sort of key files in your application. So these JSON files and stuff, and app.json, if you want to revert back, you can do that. So with that there, you'll notice there's no node modules folder. So to get that to be populated, we just do an npm install, and that'll grab all the dependencies that package.json defines, and download the files and put them in the node_modules folder. So that'll probably take a couple of minutes. It's going to pull a lot of stuff from the web. So now you can see the node modules folder popped up, and it'll start to fill up with all the different bits and pieces it needs. So while that's running, I will bring your attention to this little bit here. In our application, we have two build profiles. If I look down this list, we'll find them somewhere. Here we are, builds. So we've got a classic build profile and a modern build profile. And normally we would, when we're building one or other, we would do Sencha app build classic or Sencha app build modern, or equally Sencha app watch modern or Sencha app watch classic. And that would, focus the build and the watch process on that toolkit, that profile. So there's a wee note here in our migrate step that says check the build profiles, because we've put in a couple of defaults, but you'll need to match them up to what you actually have in your application. So if we look into package.json, we will see that it's targeting a profile called desktop and a profile called phone, which is just the defaults they use. It could be a bit smart, I suppose, and figure out what we've got in our application and create those based on what's actually there. So we just need to do one more step to get this working with our app, and that is to replace desktop with classic and phone with modern. So if we just do a find and replace for desktop, replace it with classic, and same with phone, and replace it with modern. And that just happens to be the names that we've used in our app.json builds. This could equally be desktop and that could be phone, if that was the names that we chose at the start. So that's the only thing we need to change to get that working. And you'll see that instead of just one dev and one build, we've got two of each, and testing, sorry, and two of each. So we can run the classic dev server or a modern dev server and equally build both of those individually. But we might probably want to build both profiles at once. So we're going to add a second step, or third step, sorry, that's just called build. And it will just paste that in. I'll make it wider so we can see. And basically that omits the profile part out of this step so that it will build both profiles. And that means that we can do both profiles in one build step. So we can add as many scripts in here as we like, and we can access them in the exact same way. So now we've got that. Now we can do, we can run one of these commands to get the dev server working. So we could either do npm run start or npm run dev classic to get the classic toolkit working. So let's just do npm run start. And all being well, we'll see that it's going to host on this this local URL here. Different ports from the Sencha command runs on, so just be aware of that if you've got any bookmarks floating about. Oh, hold on, we've already got something running. So it's got Sencha command running, so we've got some errors in there. So let's cancel that and rerun this. Evidently, we can't have both running at the same time. That gets started. And you see it's writing content to the classic.json. So that's going to now, rather than point to the ext folder, we'll be quick nosy in. You can see now that the sort of paths to all the files are now pointing to the node modules folder, and this is into the Sencha ext core folder. So now we can see the open tooling is changing the mapping between the ExtJS classes that we're going to use and pointing them towards the node modules folder rather than the original ext folder, which is still here. We can probably remove that now that we've got a copy in the node modules folder. And so we've kicked this is opened automatically, and we've got it running on 1962, which is the open tooling port. Excuse me, and the app runs as it did before, and that's it working. And that's all there is to it to get it migrated and running. And if we cancel that, sorry, it's hiding behind the toolbar here. If we wanted to run the modern dev, the equivalent of Sencha app watch modern, we just do npm run dev :modern. And now if we open up our dev tools to get it into emulating mode, we'll make it into a sort of small phone type shape. We can wait and it'll rebuild. So because it's not in device mode, it's opened the classic toolkit. If we refresh here, we will see it open in the modern framework version, and that's all working as it should be. So that's good. So if we close that down, finally, just want to demonstrate the run build. So again, we just use the build command, which we did to combine both profiles at once, and we can just kick that off. I see a couple of questions come in. We'll just try and just finish this little bit, and then we'll jump into the questions in a second. Thank you for putting them in and being patient until we get to them. this is really just to demonstrate that it works, but we've seen it working already in other scenarios. The only thing we'll need to copy in is the data folder, which we haven't set up to copy in as part of the build process. So I'll just get ready to paste that in when it's completed. That will pull the messages and the label JSON files. Let's get in there. Let's paste that in. Yeah, so it's finished, and we can kick off browser sync. And then we can see the app running in its build mode with the output built by the open tooling. So that's the end of that. That's how we do a migration from Sencha command with a real-ish app, universal app, moving it from Sencha command to open tooling, and going through the build process and the dev process, and how we can integrate third-party packages and integrate Sencha premium packages in there as well. So hopefully that's been a demonstration of those things and has been understandable, and everyone's followed along, and it's some useful info for you. There's a couple of questions in. I don't know if Stephen's been reading these as we go.
Yeah, I'm just kind of ready on those. One of the things is, would you mind just popping the slide up from the start that had the link back to those useful resources, just as we finish off here? Brilliant. There's that link again, which answers a couple of questions from earlier. Yeah, there's a couple of quite long questions in here, but let's pick one of the shorter ones just to start off. From what version is it possible to migrate your ExtJS app up to, or to add open tooling? Is it version 6.7, or what's the version that you can move up to?
Good question. I'm not entirely sure when the migrate command was added. It may well be added later in 6.7. I think, although I think it would work on a 6.7 app if that's what you've got, because all it's doing is adding a few extra files and things. So there's not too much. It doesn't dive into your files and start picking, making changes and picking things out and that sort of thing. It's really just changing a few bits of structure. So I think it would work for 6.7. I haven't tried it, but I think it would work. So that's the XGen version 7 point something, presumably. Let's just double check what we're on here. 7.5. So that's come out. That's obviously the 7.5.1 release, but I think it would still work. Interesting to try.
Yeah, just have a quick look on some of the documentation online, certainly pointing ExtJS 7.00. It says, starting in XGen 7.00, our open tool platform is capable of migrating ExtJS applications that were built with Sencha command or XGen, but it doesn't give the earliest version. So yeah, definitely should be absolutely fine for version 7. If you're still on version 6, as a reminder, you probably really should be getting migrated up to version 7 anyway, because it's now out of the active support mode for version 6, because it's now 2 and a bit years since the launch of version 7, which is when it kind of ends the kind of the active support element on it. So definitely worth getting migrated up to version 7, and then you should have no problems getting forward at all. I don't know if you can see, Stuart, on the, because a couple of them I think probably don't need the full detail read out, but there's a couple of questions there at the start around kind of handling upgrades, how to do that with open tooling, and so on. So any advice in terms of handling upgrades within open tooling?
So I've not, I don't think I've used the move to latest tool, but I'm guessing that's to upgrade your ExtJS version and the dependencies that that it holds. Either you can use that tool, or if you can manually upgrade the packaged versions in the package.json and then reinstall, and the install will just pick up what you've defined as the version you want. Obviously, that won't do any upgrades to your application itself. You'll still need to go through the the various upgrade processes and make sure all your code is compatible. The upgrade advisor is a good thing to use to make sure you've covered all the bases there. So I haven't used it before, so I can't comment on if it's something I trust. I assume it's working as it was intended when it was released. But it's something just to try, I guess.
Okay. I'm just having a quick read one here. There's one asking about how they're setting up using packages between development and production and so on. So in our environment, we create a number of ext packages which are used as dependencies in different projects. Those packages are published, build and add using the command cmd Sencha in a local repository, which is then transferred to a remote repository via FTP. Is it possible to publish a Sencha command package using open tooling in an npm repository, and if so, how?
So let me just read that and parse it in my head.
Yeah, it's the one from Simone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of the things also with package repositories, especially, it's great that you can get the latest version, but if there's specific build dependencies that you need and you require, then it's always important to try and make sure that you've got some route to make sure that you've got those copies specifically with the version that you're putting forward, because otherwise you've got multiple locations where things could change, and which could introduce a breaking change into your environment pretty quickly. But obviously, one of the reasons for kind of being more DevOps is to kind of adjust to these types of things, and making sure that you've always got the same between testing, development, and production.
Yeah, I think you can create your own, set up your own npm repository, just like Sencha have, which you can sort of publish your custom packages to, and then bring them in as dependencies, like you would do any other package, and that would then keep everything in the same, the same format as the core Sencha packages and any other third-party ones you have. You just have a third location, which is your own, local repository, and that means that you can, handle your dependencies and your versioning as you would do with anything else from any other source, even though that source is yourself. So that's probably a good way to do it. Mm-hmm. Publish your packages that way.
Yeah, and I guess would you be able to pull down somebody else's package and then add that package into your own local repository?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that how that would work, but I guess so, because if you've got the code, then you could push it into your own repository and have it there as a sort of mirror.
Yeah, it gives you one extra layer to manage, but if you have kind of one of the other questions from Mateus earlier was asking about how to handle when certain repositories and packages are unavailable or offline. Obviously, if you need to make sure that you've got local copies of packages if you want to make sure you've always got them available 24/7 and take that redundancy out of the way. But equally, when you're running stuff through trusted sources, as long as you've got the access to it, depends on where your build environment, your development, production, and so are separated through. If you're pushing everything into the cloud, then it's not like the days of old where you'd have everything in your local data center and you'd be managing everything locally and through. That's additional stuff to work through. So yeah, definitely an idea to kind of look at and consider. But I'd certainly say, whenever you've got a major release of a version, it's always good to make sure you've got everything backed up, regardless of where you're getting your code and packages pulled into, because just from a pure disaster recovery point of view, and testing and whatever, you want to make sure that you've got exactly the same build and packages from point A to point B. Okay, it's slightly off topic a little bit. There's an additional question here asking about how you can hide your code from dev tools at production, specifically with Sencha command, but I guess it would apply to most tools.
The short answer is you can't. Anything that gets loaded to the browser can be viewed in dev tools. Sencha command does a lot of minifying and obfuscation for more of a byte saving exercise than a hiding it from people. So basically, anything that gets loaded as part of your app is viewable in dev tools. So assume that prying eyes can see it, and that's the same for all frameworks and applications that use JavaScript code. If it goes to the client, it can be looked at. So it's going to be there, it's going to be visible. Make sure there's nothing sensitive in there that shouldn't be there. API keys and passwords and that sort of thing, obviously, that aren't meant to go to the client anyway. And just be careful from that point of view. But otherwise, it's not possible, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so I know there are some tools that can help obfuscate and make it harder to read and to work through. But not. I'd say it's quite a difficult thing to work through. There is there are some tools like I know Preemptive have a tool called JS Defender, which you can use to help protect your application against passive and active attacks for JavaScript. That might be something that's worth having a look at. Let me find a link, and I'll put a link to that in the chat. Okay. A few thank yous and great sessions and those kind of things. So thank you for the comments and the feedback on those. Great, thank you very much for the other comments that was coming through. Okay, I think we're pretty much there on the main questions on the list here. So if there's anything specific that you want to chat about further, then feel free to either drop myself or Stuart an email over. I'm more than happy to connect up and talk to you about your projects and what you've got going through. And if we can't get you the answer from what we know, we'll certainly help connect you up with somebody who can. Next week is the last one in our current series. We're then going to have a few weeks off just over the Easter period before we kind of look at other sessions moving forward. So if you've got any ideas of things that you'd like us to look at, I know it's been a lot of popular feedback around having kind of the single app that we've been working through on the different sessions here, building it up, adding the different components, adding the backend storage, integrating that into REST. Now today, having a look at how to open that up into open tooling as well. So all these kind of different lifecycle elements within a project. But if there's any specific topic areas that you'd like us to discuss and cover on the Sencha Cafe, then please feel free, again, just to drop us a message over, and we would love to hear what you're looking to do. You can email me on stephen.ball, B-A-L-L, @idera.com, or Stuart's had his email up a little bit earlier as well, so you can connect up with either of us. And there it is on the screen. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, Stuart, any final questions from you today?
No, that's everything. Thanks a lot for everyone for attending, and as I said, any further questions, just give me a shout.
Great, thanks very much everyone, happy coding, and see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.